everybody. Hi. Why don't we start with a quick introduction? So could each of you start by telling us your name, what job you do, and what excites you most about the world of STEAM? Robyn, can we start with you?
Good morning. Thank you. I'm Robyn Grebliunas, and I'm the manager of Indigenous Technical Education at First Nations Technology Council. And I'm just honored to be here this morning. And my work every day is just so exciting because we are educating young adults or adults of any age, actually, at the college level, into tech, into the tech sector. And in a variety of things, and we get to do all kinds of cool things, like from drones to AR, VR, in network technician and everything in between. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Donna, you're next on my screen.
Sure. Hi, my name is Donna Turner. I'm the Associate Dean of Computing at BCIT. I'm actually quite new to the role. I only started as Associate Dean in January. So prior to that, I've been at BCIT for about 4 years, and I've been in the role of program head and instructor. So I've been teaching mostly software project management. And what excites me right now about the world of STEAM is I feel like right now we're in a very transformative time. We've already seen like a lot of workplaces switching more to remote work, and we've seen physical workplaces being transformed to match how people are working nowadays. So I feel like we're kind of on the forefront of this new way of working, which is, I guess, a silver lining to all of the pandemic measures that we've been taking. But I think that we can use all of this and use all the knowledge that we've gotten from the pandemic and use it to make just STEAM and technology better as we go forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then last but not least, Abby.
Hi. Hello, everyone. My name is Abby Coleman Walker. I'd like to recognize that I come to you today from the unceded territories of the coastal Salish people. I have the absolute honor of coming today as a mentor. As on my normal days, you'll find me in the office of Acuitas Therapeutics, where I am the Senior Director of Operations and Finance. So I look after all of the corporate side of our business. What excites me, I'm actually fairly new to the world of STEAM, having done a pivot as part of the Great Resignation that came post-COVID. And I am so excited about, frankly, the endless possibilities. Every time I get involved in either our own work or the work of others in this field, everybody's coming up with something new, and it's extraordinary. I've never seen anything like it. I came out of banking, which really hasn't changed much in about 150 years. And so it's extraordinary to be in this field and be surrounded by people who are being creative and extraordinary and innovative every day.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And welcome to our main mentor panel here. And we're very excited to chat with you a little bit here. So we'll get started with some questions, and a reminder that if anyone in the audience at home would like to ask the panelists any questions, you can do so by following the Menti link. While we wait for your questions, I would like to start by asking you guys some questions, because I'm very curious, of course. So we'll go maybe the other direction. So we'll start with Abby. So you mentioned you're fairly new to the world of STEAM. So what specifically excites you about the work that you do at Acuitas Therapeutics?
Well, thank you, Hubert. Acuitas Therapeutics is an extraordinary organization that nobody had heard of 18 months ago. What we do is create the molecular delivery system for RNA therapeutics, which is a slightly complicated way of basically saying we're the Amazon of RNA medicines. So the molecules that we provide, essentially, you can put an RNA or an mRNA or an sRNA, and there's lots of other RNAs, it turns out, inside our little molecule, and it will carry it through the body, take it into the cell, unpack it, and then allow it to do whatever that it's targeted to do in the cell. Now, this was unknown technology, really, in other than a very small number of scientists 2 years ago, but now it's become incredibly mainstream as a result of COVID-19. And so, we've really gone from a world where our product had a lot of potential, but not a lot of delivery, essentially. And so it's so exciting to be now at the forefront of RNA-based therapeutics. The possibilities are almost endless. There is work going on now to look at mRNA and RNA therapeutics for AIDS, for cystic fibrosis, for oncology, things that continue to kill huge numbers of people globally. And it's so exciting to be able to be part of potentially, even solving one of those would be amazing.
Thank you so much. And I can definitely see that you're very excited about the work that you're involved in, which is awesome. Donna, we'll go to you next. What advice would you give somebody who is interested in exploring the field that you're working in? So you're in software project management, which I think combines a bunch of different kind of fields of different skills and things like that. So what advice would you give to somebody who's interested in exploring that?
Yeah, for software project management or really any sort of technical management, I guess my advice would be, let's see, I guess just the path to it is really just to work your way up. You can't, it's not a field that you can go straight into. You have to start like, as I did, I started as I started as a technical writer, but then after that I was, a junior software developer and then a team lead, because to be able to manage something, if you want to be a technical manager, you have to have done it and been there so that the people that you're managing can properly explain their problems to you and you will understand it, right? So I actually always had the idea in mind that I wanted to be a manager in some sort of technical field. But I knew that in order to do that, I would have to work in that technical field first. So I guess it's not really so much advice as like that's the kind of path that people would expect if they're looking at that type of job. But in any of the laddered kind of jobs, as you make your way there, I would always say communication skills and improving that, and learning about different ways to communicate. That's almost the top skill in any of those jobs, all the way from technical writer to junior developer to project manager to associate dean.
Thank you so much. That's awesome that you brought up communication. That actually brings me right to my next question to Robyn. And kind of, I was wondering, what kind of skills were the most important for you when you were working to get the role that you have right now? I think Donna mentioned communication, which I'm sure which I'm sure Abby and yourself, Robyn, you agree that that's an important part. But yeah, we're curious what other skills that you feel were very important in your role and getting you to where you are today.
Thank you. Certainly communication is a key one. That's what my graduate degree is in, is professional communications. But honestly, it's not about the graduate degree or the master's degree. It's about being there and being interested. I fell into education quite by accident, took a temporary job in a small college office to support them for 6 months, and as a very young person, and became completely inspired by the instructors, and thought that they were doing the cool work, and just kept working my way towards the classroom. I spent years working out in Indigenous communities across the province, educating. And, I appreciate Abby's excitement around where COVID brought her, because COVID certainly changed the face of education. And we've spent 2 years focusing on online education, and online technical education is not easy. Teaching drones online or network technicians in a lab online is a challenge, but it's exciting, and we're doing it, and it's really just so great. So just along with that, communication is just really letting your passion out and paying attention to the opportunities. And it's okay to put your hand up and say, hey, what you do is cool. How do I get to do that? And try different things.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you again for the three of you. Such great golden nuggets of advice, as I like to call it. Donna, I'm curious to hear, what are some of the challenges that, as a woman in STEAM, that you face in your role, or maybe that you've faced in your previous roles leading up to where you are today?
One big thing when I was in engineering at UBC, one big challenge, it wasn't very specific, but just the fact that there are so few women. Just looking around, if you're in a large class and you're one of 2 or 3 women, it's not very much of a specific challenge, but just noticing that you are in such a minority, it just kind of sometimes gives you the feeling of not belonging or not having, a good peer support group of people who are kind of more similar to you. And so I remember going through his first year engineering, feeling a little bit like I hadn't gotten a good group yet. But then as I went through, I found that there were groups that I could join. There was a women in engineering group, and there was a group called West and things like that. So then I kind of slowly was able to find those kind of groups. But I found it to be less so of a visible difference once I entered industry. I don't know why that is, but I just remember in school it felt like so daunting. And once I entered jobs, it seemed like there were just more women around me or in those types of roles. But I have to say, in computing or in software, where I kind of made my way through, I haven't gotten as much outright, comments about my gender or things like that as some of my, my former classmates and now friends, especially like I have one friend in mining, and the things that she would describe were pretty bad. And I would say, well, I've never gotten that, but maybe it's because I work in an office on a computer and I'm not in the field like you are, right? So specifically to me, not much, but just things I've noticed and things I've heard. Like, I know it's out there, those kinds of challenges about being a woman in engineering or computing.
Thank you so much for outlining those. Yeah, I think definitely things are changing, and I think here having you guys here as role models to these to the audience here as a testament of how things are and the culture is changing. Robyn, I'm curious to hear, have you noticed any common misconceptions about your field? Kind of even throughout now, or even again up and coming throughout your role, any common misconceptions that you've noticed, and how do you think we can work better to communicate through these misconceptions and challenge them?
Oh, tough question.
That's a tough one. I'm sorry, I gave you a tough one.
I don't even know if I've had any misconceptions in my work. Certainly, when we talk about online education, there's a conception of, students just working online and asynchronously and independently, and we just do that all differently. So we are in the classroom like this all day long with our students. We're creating our classrooms, but in an online environment. So there might be a misconception of what our online education is, but we do a really good job of communicating out to our audience why our classrooms are different, why our experience is different. Tough question, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think you answered that perfectly right there. I think a misconception definitely of online learning. I mean, 3 years ago, who would have thought that online learning would be almost the norm of what we do? So I think that's a huge misconception that you just addressed right there. So thank you so much, and I apologize again. That was a bit of a tough one, but you handled it great. Abby, maybe we'll do one more question of my own curiosity question, and then we'll open it up for some of the audience questions. So again, the audience, if you would like to keep submitting questions, please feel free to do so via the menti.com link. But my last question to you, Abby, is what changes would you like to see in your field in the next few years? Again, maybe a little bit of a tough one.
No, I think that's a fantastic question. I mean, I think there's so many opportunities for change. I think, similar to Donna and to Robyn, I think I've experienced certainly a certain amount of bias, should we say, in my career. I've often been the only woman in a room during my career, and it's a strange feeling at best, and at worst, it's surrounded by microaggressions and sometimes downright outward aggressions, and that has to change. I mean, it's not actually optional. And I know, I can think of generations of women before me that have been saying the same thing, and it is, but it's too slow. And actually, it's having a detrimental impact on our society. And so I think particularly in STEAM is successful through diverse ideas, right? I mean, that's how you become successful in STEAM. You bring something new to the table. If all those people at the table think the same, you're never going to end up being the most successful or the most innovative or come up with the next best, shiny whatever it is, right? It just doesn't work that way. And so organizations that continue to not support diversity, continue to, go down much more traditional working models, even in the hybrid working environment, I think their days are numbered, honestly. The statistics around how much more successful diverse organizations are versus ones which are full of, the same person over and over and over, are out there. It's clear. The business case is shockingly clear. And so I think that's the change that has to happen. And I think any sensible business person, sensible employer, sensible institution is going to look at that and know exactly what they need to do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you again to the three of you for those great answers. That satisfied my curiosity, as I'm sure the audience is very, very curious. So maybe we'll pull the menti.com link if we can and see if there are a couple of questions that have come from the audience. Perfect. So what is a moment in your career that helped shape you? That's a really, really great question. I can throw it to maybe one person first and direct it and see if anybody else would like to answer. So maybe Robyn, would you like to take a shot at this one? And then if anyone else wants to, feel free to jump in after.
Thank you. I think the moment that helped shape me was the moment I realized I was on the wrong career path. So I'd spent my high school years planning and working towards going into being an RN in nursing, and there were long wait lists at the time. And so I was taking some college courses on the wait list, and I was having so much trouble with chemistry. I was just like, why am I here? And just did a change then, just a slight change, and just went into like a business admin, which led me to that temporary position in the college that I spoke about, and then got really focused on my education and my opportunities and shaping those to be in the classroom and educate others. So it was the shaping moment is accepting that change is okay, that what we think when we're younger is the path, or even the path we choose. Even though I've always been in education, I've had the opportunity to do lots of things in that field, and try lots of other things on the sideline. And I think we just have to be open to that journey. And like as we've heard Abby say, she's in a total different world, right? So I'm even looking at that a lot now in this changes of COVID in the last 2 years. Is like the whole world is reassessing what's right for them, and no matter what age or stage we're at in our career, I think we have to be open to new opportunities and where things lead us. I would have never guessed I'd be working in technical education ever. and it's just so exciting, because it's what's needed in the world.
Yeah, well, here you are. Thank you so much. I think that was a great message to send, just being to our audience there, just being open to whatever comes by, and also realizing that your path is not linear ever. It's always, full of twists and turns. Abby and Donna, anything else to add to that point or to that question there?
Go ahead, Donna.
Oh, I was going to say it's just very, very similar to what Robyn said. Just the idea that change is okay. You know, my big switch from industry to being an instructor initially at BCIT, it was a huge switch for me. I mean, I made lists and I debated about it. I was offered the job and then I turned it down. And then I kept working for 4 more months, and then I thought about it again, and then I applied again. It was just a huge change for me. But I just had to realize, even though I had always wanted to be a software project manager, the job that I was in just didn't fit my lifestyle. My commute was too far. You know, I wasn't being able to take the time off to spend with my kids that I wanted to. And then someone suggested BCIT teaching to me. I had never been a teacher before, ever. You know, the most I had done was maybe as a professional engineer, I maybe mentored other engineers in training. So it took me a long time, you know, and then as I just said, I rejected it and then I went back to it. But now I'm very happy. Like, it was a really good change for me, but it took me a while to get there.
Thank you. And go ahead, Appy. I know you had a point to make as well.
Well, I mean, I absolutely agree with Donna and Robyn with regards to change and nonlinear and the power of assessing what you really want and what you're really good at. I think if I look back on my career and I think about a moment, I mean, there have been lots of fascinating moments where I have learned many things, both good and bad. But for me, actually, I had my first child when I was 34. And up until then, I had no idea how powerful I was. And it took having a baby for me to realize how incredible my body was, how capable I was able to be. You know, trying to keep there's nothing like trying to keep a baby alive when you really have no idea what you're doing. There's no training for that. For you to realize how you can pivot and change and reflect and how powerful, you know, you are able to be in your own life. And I think it was at that point that I really was like, you know what? I'm going to lead my own path from now on. No more listening to everybody else. No more, the crushing underconfidence you have at the beginning of your career where you just don't know what you're doing and you're not sure and you're so nervous and you're so worried about getting it wrong. And I think at some point for me, and it was when I had my baby, that I was just like, you know what? I am just going to do this my way. And it was liberating in an extraordinary sense.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was a lovely answer. And that reminded me, throws us back to earlier today. We had a speaker, Alexis Williams, who also spoke about confidence and the importance of it. So thank you so much for that. Let's take another question from the audience here. So I'm glad all three of you had the chance to answer that previous one. That was a really good question. And this also looks like a really great question. Awesome questions to the audience that are coming in. Really, really fantastic. So if you had to go back, what is something you wish you could have done differently in your career/education? That is a very, very interesting question. Donna, I might throw it to you first if you had an answer to this question, but I think this might be one that we'll try to see if anyone else has an answer as well, or if everyone would like to answer, but go ahead.
I don't have an answer because my answer is just nothing.
That's
because
perfect.
Even though my path is very twisty and turny, because of where I am now, like even the fact that I turned it down and then went back to it, that just made me sure that I was, you know, when I finally accepted that it was the right thing for me. So, you know, because I'm happy where I am now, I wouldn't change anything that I've done in the past.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear that you're owning that. I think that's awesome. Robyn and Abby, anything else to add for that question or echoing the sentiments of Donna?
I completely echo Donna. Mine was twisty and turny, and it probably will be in the future, but I wouldn't change a thing. It's led me to where I am today.
Awesome.
So I do have things that I would change, and that's not because I'm not thrilled with where I am now, but for me it came back to the confidence thing. I wish I'd had the confidence to call time on bad situations faster. I think I put up with some really terrible situations, some really poor experiences for far too long in various stages of my career. And if I'd called time on them earlier, I suspect that I'd have probably been happier overall. Now, obviously, those experiences have also contributed to where I am today. And I am very grateful and very pleased with how where I am now, and I'm fascinated to see where I go from here. I've still got 20 working years left. I mean, I'm like barely halfway through my career, which is a terrifying thought, but really exciting. And but I think that's the lesson I take with me into the next 20, which is that if something doesn't feel right, don't there's nothing to be gained from sticking it out. You have nothing to prove to anyone other than yourself.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those words. All right, let's take another question from the audience. We're getting some really great questions. It's awesome here. What is the best piece of advice you ever received? My gosh, this is a really great question. I usually try not to ask one question to all three of you, but the audience has just been asking such fantastic questions that it's really hard not to get all of your perspective on this one. Abby, could we start with you for that one?
The best piece of advice I received from my mother, which was, why marry a lawyer or a doctor if you can be one? And she said that to me when I was about 7, and it's been formative for my entire life.
Awesome. I think that's great advice, and to be given that advice so young, I think very, very powerful as well. Robyn, what about you?
Well, I'll hold my hands up to Abby's mother here. What great advice. The best advice doesn't compare to Abby's mother. I was young and in starting my career in education, and a coworker, a dean, said to me, when you're feeling down, dress up. When you're just not feeling like you have the strength to get through the day, dress the part that day. So, we all have ways we dress, but there is something really powerful about just putting on that extra piece of professional look in a day where it just lifts you up. And I've carried that for decades.
Perfect. Thank you. And last but not least, Donna.
Yeah, I have one also that I've carried with me ever since university. And I tell all of my students or anyone that I mentor, I tell them the same thing, which is it came from my co-op coordinator when I was in UBC engineering. And, I finished second year and I'm now looking for my first co-op placement. And there's a job board and you're not sure what to apply for because you don't quite fit any of these jobs. And so the advice was, if you've got about half of what they list as qualifications or what the job entails, just apply for it. Because, they're not expecting you really to have everything. A lot of these are perhaps nice to haves, right? So if you've got about half of what's on that job description, just apply, right? And when I've told people this, especially some female students, they're like, oh, really? Because there was one student I know who was almost an exact fit for a job, but the job said, it would be nice if you had a blog. And she didn't have a blog, so she thought, I'm not going to apply for this job. I'm like, no, you have everything else. It doesn't, just apply, get in that interview, show them who you are, right? And I've carried that with me also throughout my career, because when the associate dean position became open, I really maybe I had about half of what it said on there. I have my professional credentials, but I don't have a master's or a PhD. And at BCIT, a lot of those kind of upper management positions are held by people who have PhDs and very, very, a lot of credentials through the academic stream. And I have my credentials through the professional and working stream. But I applied anyway and I got it. So I followed the advice that I've carried with me and my own advice that I give to students, which is, if you've got about half of what it says on the job description, just go for it.
There you go. Thank you so much. Great nuggets of advice to our audience here today. All right, we'll take another question from the audience. If we can pull the menti.com link up here again. If you were to do a job in a different kind of field, what would you do? Another great question. Abby, actually, I think you went from banking to working at Acuitas Therapeutics.
Well, yes.
Very different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did this, and it's sort of a long story as to why, but essentially, yeah, absolutely. I went from banking to biotech, and that's been a fantastic opportunity to do. But I mean, when I fantasize about what I would do, I want to be a florist. I've always loved flowers. I'd love to be a florist, but I don't have the patience for it. And I know this. I've been to lots of flower arranging courses, and I usually get really irritated by it in about sort of 20 minutes because you have to be so precise. And I'm not that person. But yes, that's probably, other than banking to biotech, and then maybe florist if I had a different temperament.
Yeah, well, there you go. You know your limitations. So
maybe when I retire, maybe that'll happen. You never know.
Awesome.
Like I said, I got 20 working years left. Anything can happen.
There you go. Let's pull another question from the audience, just so we can try to get through a lot of them. I do want to recognize our audience for asking such great questions. So let's pull another one from the menti.com. So let's see here. Do you have any silly, funny memories in your career you're comfortable sharing? That's a nice question. Robyn, can I throw this one to you?
Oh, you throw me the tough one.
Oh, did I? Oh no.
I'm sure there's many. There's just trying to land on one where you just have to learn to laugh, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if these are funny, but because before COVID, we were working out in remote Indigenous communities. So I was flying out to jobs a lot. And, they're just like Google Maps got me lost so much. And in dangerous situations where it took me because it would take me the fastest route into this remote community. So up over a mountain, and, I'd be lost and out of cell service and have to turn around and go back. And, those could cause panic, but you just kind of laugh and you call and you say, well, this is what happened. And they laugh and say, yeah, that happened to an ambulance once, it's okay. I'm sure I have many, but just being able to laugh when you make mistakes, or because you could just, by then I'm an hour late, say, arriving in the community, and just being human and yourself. Maybe not the best answer. I'm sure I'll think of a really great story when we're done here.
Yeah, that's always how it works. Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, you're here today, so that's what's most important. So I'm glad that the Google Maps situation, you're out of that. But yes, I think a great lesson for our audience to just laugh. Let's pull the menti.com link, and we'll keep going with our questions from the audience. And Donna, this one's for you. So what do you have to do? This is a tongue twister. There are lots of letters that end with, or words that end with O, but what do you do to have fun outside of the STEAM world? Donna, there you go.
Well, I've got 2 kids, so they take up a lot of my time. So they're a lot of fun. I've got a son in grade 4 and a daughter in grade 1. Well, one thing I've recently started doing that I think is fun is I'm taking piano lessons with them, because I wanted them to learn piano. And I have no musical instruments, or, I'm not musical, but I kind of always wanted to learn. So I said, well, why don't I do the lessons with you? So when we have our piano teacher come, she does half an hour with all 3 of us. And so I'm learning at the age of 41, I'm learning to play the piano and, doing my homework every day. And so it's pretty fun. And a smaller thing is that my son got a Rubik's Cube for Christmas, and I watched a bunch of YouTube videos, and now I can solve a Rubik's Cube in under 3 minutes. So I'm like, every night I tell them, here, mix it up and time me. And then I do my Rubik's Cube for the day.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, a great testament to how important it is to have fun outside of kind of your job and what you do. I think that's awesome. All right, let's keep going to the audience for some more questions. I think we have about a couple more minutes left, so we can get a couple more questions in there. A great question that I think I'll ask to all 3 of you. What's the best resource for those wanting to get into your career, or maybe looking at a very similar career path? Abby, let's start with you.
Oh, gracious. Well, I mean, as I sort of already explained, mine's been very non-linear. So I don't think it's necessarily replicatable, or would I necessarily recommend it to be replicated? But I think one of my kind of philosophical pieces, and I'll use that term quite loosely, was I've always been about breadth rather than depth. So in my career, I've really tried to focus on learning a large variety of things rather than getting really deep on something. So I work in operations and finance and HR and all these things. And so I've had, over my career, I've worked in all of those areas in different ways. So I've had exposure to them all. And I started my career actually as a consultant with PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is one of the big 4 accountancy firms. And again, that was very, very broad, and it's sort of the things you got involved in. And that's really served me, because what it means is that I can do I can do all sorts of different kinds of jobs now, because I have experience in lots of different areas. So I think particularly if you don't, if you're really sort of, there's something you're very passionate about and you want to just go a very linear way through that, then obviously you need to be getting into the detail. If you are sort of more interested in variety and change and kind of taking on different things, then I would honestly say the best resource is to really take on something. Make sure that every time you take a job or a internship or whatever it is you're looking at, make sure you're taking something new. One of the other good pieces of advice I got in my career was if your next job doesn't scare you, then you're doing the wrong thing. And I would definitely say that that's something to look at. So you want to be doing things that really challenge and give you that breadth if you want to have a slightly skewy career like I have.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Robyn, you're up next.
Thank you. For me, I would say it's building your network. And I know that seems like a big word for maybe when you're young, but who are your contacts? Who are your mentors? Whose work are you passionate about? Where you're kind of at the window peeking in and saying, that looks really cool. Also, in the world of education, it's easy to think, okay, I have to take this linear path up through education. But Donna just demonstrated earlier that that's not true. And we are in a world right now of, those professional credentials, academic credentials like degrees, and then micro credentials, where you just go take the training. And certainly in the tech world, employers are leaning towards those micro credentials. Do you know how to do this job versus do you have a degree on your resume? And that's it's an interesting statement to make, as I came through that linear education, and I believe in it. So I'm not saying it's not there, but this whole new world has opened up in what's called micro credentials, and just getting the training you need to do the job. And I find myself often talking to people about that. And a good example of that is one of our graduates who doesn't have that, university level training necessarily, or education training, but has just thrived in our coding courses at each level. We're now mentoring to put in the classroom and as a subject matter expert to develop curriculum with us. So you can shine in so many ways, through your networks, through your mentors, through who you're speaking with and putting yourself in front of. And just be passionate.
Thank you so much. Last but not least, Donna.
I think for students, I think co-op programs are a huge resource, because they're very organized and they have a good pool of sponsors and employers, and then it gets you really good entry-level kind of experience before you even graduate. And another one I think is hackathons. This is kind of more computing specific, right? But there were so many hackathons out there that other people run and organize, and they're usually quite short, like a day and a half to 2 days. They don't require any prep. You just come in, they'll put you in a team, you work on an idea, and you may place or you may just get the experience, but they're short, organized, focused ways of just getting that kind of experience. So whenever the students are at a loss of, I didn't get into co-op or I didn't get a co-op placement, I'll say, go do some hackathons, right? And I think they're everywhere, and you can always find one. Almost every weekend you could find a hackathon that you could partake in.
Such great pieces of advice. Thank you so much. Maybe we'll pull one more question, from the audience, and then we'll go to maybe one final question. We'll see how our time goes. So can we pull another question from the audience? Oh, that's a great one. How do you create community in your career, especially with the isolation of working online? That's a really, really interesting one. I'm going to leave it open to any of the mentors if anybody would like to tackle this one. I think I'm not going to choose a specific one. You can just raise your hand if that's this one's one you'd like to answer. Go ahead, Robyn. I was hoping that you would answer it, but I was like, I don't want to throw this one to you because I hope it's not a tough question.
Actually, in March 2020, we all went online. Really, the world did. But I was working remote from my team before that. So I'm in the Okanagan in BC. My team was all down in North Van, and then our classrooms were across the province. So I was the first person working remote. And that was tough because everybody else was in one place and had to talk them into embracing that. And so we just, communication was key. I had to keep reminding them that I was, didn't know that the staff meeting was delayed by 5 minutes or something. But the big thing that I developed in there that we've carried through in this online world we've been in now for 2 years, and our teams across Canada now, is virtual coffees. So as a new person starts, I always reach out and say, why don't we have a virtual coffee? We try to do that. It's because we run from meeting to meeting, and we're in online like this all the time communicating. But there's just such value in just jumping on a call and having a cup of coffee, and whether there's 10 people in the room or 2, and just talking like you would in the coffee room at work.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we're closing in on our time. So I think I'd like to round this off with one last question. My last question for you is, I know you gave such great golden nuggets of advice throughout this question period, but if there's one kind of final closing piece of advice that you would give specifically to our audience, what would that be? Abby, we'll start with you.
I think I would just say, be brave, right? You have so much potential, so much opportunity. Be brave and go for it. The world is literally your oyster in this day and age. And if you want it and you want to go for it, just give it a try. The worst that can happen is that it turns out you were wrong, and you'll learn an amazing lesson. So yeah, just be brave.
Awesome. Thank you. Donna?
Kind of along the same lines as be brave, but I think what I would say is always do the hard thing first. This is kind of like a project management nugget as well, but like, you've got something hard to do and you've got 10 easy things to do. Do the hard one first. Don't keep putting it off. The longer you put off, the more difficult conversation or having to deliver, having to deliver potentially bad news to a customer, like, we're behind schedule, we're over budget. Just do it as fast as possible because the longer you put it off, the worse it's going to get. So, and the same thing whenever you're working in a team, if you're having any conflict, get it out of the way first, right? Or if you have a bunch of tasks to do, don't procrastinate on the hardest one. That's my last piece of advice, I guess.
Thank you so much. And finally, Robyn.
Thank you. I would say honor yourself. And I know it's easy for us at this point in our careers to say, yeah, don't stay in something too long or know who you are, but just know that now. Just know it. Just look yourself in the eye in the mirror and say, I know who I am. I know what I want, even if you don't. And if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. And know what you bring, even if you're working for people who have more credentials, and just know the hard work that you bring to that team and what you bring, and honor yourself in that. But find some balance. Balance is a key, one that I struggle with, and don't get lost in the work. So the best work you can do is through being healthy and balanced. And so finding that life work balance from a young age would be something, because I've had to undo years of not finding that balance.
Thank you so much. Thanks again, Robyn, Donna, and Abby. Such great pieces of advice. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and answering all of our questions. And you've given us a lot of information and, again, golden nuggets of advice to think about. And welcome back to everyone who chose to visit our mentor breakout sessions.